really great pleasure to be here. So thank you all for coming along. I hope I can give you some really practical insights into what's happening in terms of the job market and what you can actually take away today and implement. So that's my purpose for today. I'll give you a bit of a background on who we are. JobGetter is a Sydney-based startup, now considered kind of a scale-up, I guess, 8 years on. We were founded basically because we had a pain point that we were trying to solve ourselves 8 years ago. We were working as consultants, looking for extra work to fit around our consulting practice and finding it incredibly frustrating to try to find jobs that fit into the days and times we had available. And working with a lot of SMEs at the time, we knew that the problem on their side was finding people to fit into their work styles. So they would say things like, I just need a bookkeeper 2 days a week, or somebody to help out with marketing 10 hours a month. And so we saw that gap in the market for someone to create, basically at the time we said, a dating site for jobs. You know, if I could just type into a job site, these are the days I can work and the times I can work, these are my skills, show me everything that's available, that would be great. And at the time, I'll touch on some of these metrics, but we knew that the part-time market, the flexible market, was growing at twice the rate of full-time work. So again, we knew that it was a trend that somebody should start tackling, and why not us? So now we run the biggest job seeker survey annually in Australia. We found, while I'm American, there's a lot of stats coming out of the US and the UK about job seeking and the job market, but not enough in Australia. So we started running a survey, which I'll touch on some of the outcomes of those reports in today's presentation. Our business is basically a blend of job technology, marketplace, applicant tracking system, and also workforce analytics, which is probably the more exciting area. We found that our marketplace and the way that we built our tech allowed us to identify what was happening in the job market in much more real time than anything else. So you look at census data or ABS data, and it's very difficult to look at what's happening now, what's happening today, to make more strategic decisions about hiring, but also job seeking. What skills should I be developing to get the jobs that are available in my community? Just isn't information that's available to people. So that's a really exciting area for us working in. And what we've done too is community work. So currently we have an active program in Southern Inland, New South Wales, bringing the whole ecosystem together to try to sync employer demand with skill supply, and working with education groups to understand these are the skills that our community needs to be able to grow businesses, create more jobs. And if we can sync that and provide that information to the community, then people can make more strategic decisions about their career paths. So we try to bring everybody that has a role to play in that ecosystem together through our technology, and that comes with a lot of integrations and collaborative strategies, collaborative tech. So I'll touch on some of that. But today, the basic agenda that I'm going to take you guys through in the next 2 hours is touching on the job market. I think it's really important to understand what is going on out there, so you know where you sit in that process and how to leverage it for your own hiring needs and workforce planning needs. Talk about your opportunities as a regional startup specifically. What do you have at your advantage that you can use to leverage? How to define your unique CVP. A lot of people talk about EVP, employee value proposition, but we talk about candidate value proposition. If you get that right, how to define it, how do you use that to sell the opportunity to come and work for you? So again, hopefully some really practical things that you can take away from today and implement. And then what's at your disposal in terms of your recruitment arsenal? What can you use at almost no cost to build a really sustainable recruitment funnel that will service you as your company grows and you do need to find talent? And then I'll just wrap things up with a bit of a summary in terms of recruitment and HR 101, especially from a startup perspective. So that's kind of the agenda. I hope today is collaborative, so feel free to interrupt me at any time. I do talk fast. I'm quite open about that. So if I'm just talking too quickly, don't be afraid to tell me. And I also really want, if you've got a question or you've got a specific concern, or you think something doesn't apply to you and we can workshop it a little bit, I'd love to be able to make that. It's a quite intimate group, so feel free. So the job market, what you need to know. Touching on the fact that everything is changing. Recruitment is one of those areas that I think has really largely been able to evade innovation for a really long time. The biggest change we've seen in recruitment really is the move from offline advertising to online advertising in the 90s. And other than that, it really hasn't changed much. So we are starting to see more innovation, more people trying to solve challenges, but it's basically throw out the rule book and problem solve. And that's, I think, what's been one of our strengths is we started our business as job seekers who had a pain point. We had no idea how HR or recruitment was traditionally done. And that gave us an opportunity to look at the problems from a totally objective viewpoint. And I think that's been one of our strengths as a business, is we've been able to throw out that rule book and go, well, this is the problem. How do we solve that most effectively? And collaborate and co-create with our clients and our job seekers to do that. So first things first, everything's changing. So if you've worked in recruitment, has anybody worked in recruitment other than Dimity? Yeah. Okay. So you would know kind of the strategies. And I hope some of the stuff I talk on today, we've started to see more of trends, people talking about it, more people starting to implement it now, but it's taken us 8 years to really drive awareness in some of the messages that I'll share with you today. So just generally, the rise of machines. So everybody likes to talk about, Skynet's coming and what does that mean for people? And we're all going to lose our jobs. And we don't agree with that. Things are changing, absolutely, but we're seeing that 40 to 45% of all work-related tasks will be automated by 2030, which is pretty significant for kind of those middle entry-level roles that are very task-based, that can be replicated by technology, things in accounting, bookkeeping, even some legal, a lot of moves towards resources being done online, chatbots, customer service, all those sorts of roles that are going to be automated. So what does that mean for people in those roles now? How do they adapt and evolve? Also, how do you leverage those tools so you don't have to hire somebody straight away, so that you can keep your costs down as a startup in the early stages? They're saying 5 million jobs will be replaced by technology in the next 10 to 15 years. But there's all of these jobs that are emerging. And again, going back to my point about having access to what's actually happening in the job market in terms of job demand and skill supply, we can identify much faster now through technology what skills are emerging, what jobs are emerging. They say, you would hear often in the talks of future of work summits and that sort of thing, that you start a degree year one, and by year 4, when you're graduating, that job either has changed so dramatically, the skills you've learned are no longer relevant, or the job market has diminished and new jobs have been created. So how do you keep evolving? And that's where that mega trend globally of lifelong learning is becoming so important. Jobs requiring human skills that aren't duplicatable by machines are what's going to be growing. So what makes us inherently human? What can a computer or a machine not replicate? That's where our strengths come into play. And I think, again, when you're thinking about your workforce planning, rather than think about hiring someone for a role that can be used, you can use technology to automate or make more efficient. What is it that's inherently human? Those creative roles, those strategic roles, they need to be the ones that you focus on. Change driven by cloud computing and artificial intelligence and big data. So obviously, we're all in that startup space. We're all aware of those kind of big themes. Keeping abreast of it and knowing how that affects your business is going to be really important in terms of workforce planning. So I've touched on this, but work is definitely getting more flexible. So again, 8 years ago, we saw a trend of part-time work growing at twice the rate of full-time over a 10-year period. Now, today, it's 3 times the rate of full-time work. Full-time jobs in Australia are down from 83.1% down to 69.2%. So it's a pretty dramatic drop. Part-time jobs are growing from 16.9% to 30.8%. And 1 in 3 people will be working casually by 2020. So it's pretty significant. And when you think about the impact of that on people's lives, not only are people choosing to work more casually, Dimity and I were talking earlier today, and I think, one, it's driven by the desire to have more flexibility around work-life balance, family, whether it's childcare, parent care. It's just a life choice for a lot of people now because it's not seen as you have to work full-time. And I think there's also a real trend towards, with the economic times that we've had in the last, say, 10 to 15 years, people feel less secure in their full-time positions. So if I am not going to have the same security in working for a company, because if that company goes through tough times and I could be made redundant or let go, then I might as well take the risks that come along with working casually or working as a contractor or having more than one job, and at least then I'm in control. So we're seeing that affect the way people work. We see this happening more and more. The style of businesses in terms of their workforce acting more like a movie crew has always traditionally worked, where you bring the people and the resources you need for a certain project together to work on a challenge or work on a key project, and then disperse them afterwards. So that contractor-based model of bringing people in and out is becoming more mainstream. So again, thinking about your own businesses, how do you use a style of work that brings people in when you need them, and then lets you not carry that employee burden along with you as you're growing, because it's a huge cost. In our 8 years, staff costs have been the #1 spend over that period. And if you can make that more efficient and effective for you and be more strategic about who you're bringing in, you're going to be using your money much more strategically. Underemployment. So the kind of downside of that move towards casualization means more and more people are underemployed. They want more work and they can't find it. So they say 1 in 8 Australians want more work. The rise of part-time work gives rise to a rise in underemployment. And in 2009, 6% of the workforce held more than one job. In 2016, it was 9%. We saw this especially, say, around 2008, 2009 with the GFC, at least in America. People had up to 4 jobs at a time trying. And again, that increase in needing to find work that fit certain days and times became much more apparent. So considering that, when you're thinking about workforce planning, how do you offer flexibility to someone who needs it? Maybe you can then carry a casual or a contractor or a part-time worker for 2 days a week. That appeals to more of the wider market than offering a full-time position. We have an example with a client that works in logistics, big logistics company, where they were trying to find local delivery drivers for a 10-hour shift, and impossible. The recruiter who was in charge of that project or that requirement was pulling her hair out saying, I just can't find enough people. She tried everything. And we said to her, why don't you restructure that position to be 2 5-hour shifts rather than 1 10-hour? You would open up working parents who want to work school hours, mature age workers who only want to work 5 hours a day. You would just open up so many more potential people. Sorry, go ahead. You have a question?
Yes, I do. But
that's okay.
This is very interesting, particularly now in the middle of an election. Unemployment and underemployment is very hot.
Big themes.
But, that bottom bullet point, we're sort of told, I'm not sure if this is right, that underemployment is a bad thing because it leads to unemployment. Well, I'm not sure if that's right or not. But is that the case, or is it, as we're more switching from permanent full-time to more part-time, as a result of that, people will often, the part-time employees will often be seeking more work. If you're a delivery driver or you're Uber, by the very nature of your role, you're always seeking another job, another task. Is that necessarily a bad thing then, the underemployment, or wanting more work?
It does depend on how they're defining underemployment. So if it's the fact that they're underemployed and can't find and want more work, then it's a problem because people don't have access to the income that they need or want for their lifestyle. I think there is a difference between people who are quite happy being underemployed, not working 40 hours a week because that suits their lifestyle and their choices better. But I think when they typically talk about underemployment, it's that gap where people want more work and they can't access it.
So generally people that move into a part-time, what is it called? Is it the gig economy?
Yeah, the gig economy, yes. Yep.
So if you switched from a full-time role to a part-time role, you obviously you're very unlikely to want more work if you're in full-time. If you then become a delivery driver, you would almost always be wanting more.
Especially as a gig worker, yes. Yeah.
So as the population switches from more part-time from full-time into part-time, we're naturally going to get an increasing amount of underemployment.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Tradition. And where I think the difference is where it's a problem is people not able to access the work that they need to support themselves. So even gig workers, you could argue some people, they don't have to get the next gig. So, you know, maybe students who are quite comfortable at home and are working just for pocket money, or mature age workers who are retired technically, but like to keep themselves busy. I wouldn't really classify them as underemployed because they don't have to find that next gig. It's just more of a social exercise or a pocket money exercise. But yeah, it's a good point, because I think sometimes the media and politicians make these statistics sound way worse than they are. And there are certainly very serious considerations when it comes to underemployment and the rise in casualization. And I think socially, community-wise, what does that mean for the banking sector? We always talk about the superannuation sector. If I'm working as a gig worker for 4 or 5 years, what's happening to my super? It's very unlikely I'm contributing to it as a worker, especially if I'm a uni student and it's not even on my radar. And then also say I am a uni student, I've been working in a gig economy, and then I'm now 28 and ready to invest in my first home. If a bank won't lend to me because I've been a gig worker or a contractor, how does society fix those challenges? And we've been talking about that for years, but I don't know that anybody is really coming up with solutions yet, or even talking about it enough. And it's a pretty serious social issue. So yeah, good point. Sure.
So when you talk about the casualization of the workforce and then moving to part-time, are you talking about across the board, like right from the the CEO down to the across to the workers picking berries?
Yeah, it does. It does affect. We are seeing it across sector. Maybe not CEO levels, but we do see quite a few more opportunities for not casual CEOs, but job share CEOs or part-time CEOs, depending on the style of business and the size of business. So we are seeing it affect all levels and all industries, and industries that you traditionally haven't considered to be volatile, like legal or accounting or finance, where parents are very much pushing children still into those career paths because they're seen as stable and secure, and you're going to make good money and you're going to be successful if you go through those career paths. But we're seeing those are the industries that are being affected by automation in a pretty significant way. That means the job demand is reduced, or the job demand for certain roles is reduced. So again, it's that more strategic legal position or that more strategic accounting position rather than the low level entry level, which then has a fall on effect for youth employment. Because if those entry level jobs that are largely able to be automated are being dropped off, what does that mean for open opportunities to the younger workforce coming through to get a foothold? If all of a sudden more of the positions are in that experienced strategic level, how does that impact? And we're seeing incredibly, you guys are in an area where high youth unemployment is a really serious topic. What does that mean? So again, socially, community-wise, what does that mean for us? Okay. Right. Okay, right. So you would be aware, yeah.
Roles that are quite senior, like a service manager or that kind of someone who's managing across the board, and they're part-time.
Right. Interesting.
Okay, really interesting.
It is, especially because it's an attractive, on that point, I think it's a way to attract people out of, say, the Sydney market to a regional community, because they have that skill level, but they don't want to work the high pressure full-time opportunity. So that's an advantage here. Yes. Yeah. Yes. For sure. Yes.
That was just on the back of your question. That was what I was going to ask as well, which is, do you see, so city living, there's a lot of information, certainly from personal experience. Both partners in a home have to work full time because you're paying
ridiculous
your mortgage.
Yes.
And things in the city. Whereas, regional lifestyle tends to be a little bit lower cost. Do you see that there's a difference between sort of the city statistics for part-time, or part-time is different from contract, isn't it?
It is.
Part-time is a secure longer term type of position where you would get superannuation, and contract is more the gig kind of work that we're talking about. So do you see much of a difference in trends in the city versus regional areas?
We do. I haven't touched on it in my presentation what they are, but there are definite trends. And I think using that to the advantage when you're recruiting for a role that is regional, pointing that out to people in the wider market is really important. Just generally, we do see more flexibility in regional areas, more, not just flexibility in terms of work type, but also ability to work from home, you know, shorter commute times, all of those sorts of considerations. Absolutely. Yeah. So underemployment, I've already touched on part-time work, but it's just interesting to look at the job requirements for part-time is growing across industries to the point. It does touch all industries. So this is basically showing the 1996 average versus the 2016 average across all sectors. You can see the black mark is well behind, except for in mining and construction, pretty far behind. So it's growing across all industries. And even in those kind of, say, construction roles, you see contract. So rather than part-time, it's still contract work. People can pick it up and put it down, same with mining. So while it's not part-time, it's definitely still that flexible natured work style. So in terms of job demand, what I think is important to understand, it is important to understand and watch what's happening in the market so you know where you stack up. These are some of our stats pulled from across all publicly available job data in Australia in April. IT is number one in terms of what was the most advertised roles. So it means that there's high demand for jobs that are related to the IT sector. Now, when we look at the data, because of the algorithms we have, we're able to identify the kind of roles that are being most advertised. And really what we see is it's not always the software developer roles, to be quite frank. And that's what often the media covers, is the fact that we can't get enough software developers here. And that's what we all hear. It's just the rhetoric. And that is true. It is difficult to find the right tech talent. But also we see a huge demand for business development roles in IT. You can build the greatest tech platform in the world, but if you can't sell it, you have no business. So we see a really strong demand for that sales role. And I think in our own experience as a business, that's been one of the challenges that we've struggled with over 8 years. Is we've been quite fortunate that we have been able to recruit a tech team. We've outsourced some of that work after hiring kind of 5 or 6 junior developers who all left after, you know, anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, with then leaving us a legacy of junior code, which is difficult to keep up with. And really not having any loyalty despite employee share option plans and that sort of thing, which is what everybody advises you to do. At the end of the day, we've, in our experience, found that while it's nice to have from a junior dev's point of view, it doesn't necessarily keep them wedded to your business all the way through to conclusion. So we've then outsourced some of our junior tech work overseas because as a business, it's much more efficient and affordable for us to do that. Not always great in terms of PC, but as a startup, you have to do what's right for the business so you can continue to grow and ideally then create more jobs in Australia locally. But that's what we've done. But business development, so that's where we've hired again and not found the right skill set, because not only do you have to find the right sales skill set, well, I think that's my point, is you have to find the right skills for sales. So some people are really great at selling an actual physical product. Others are really great at relationship selling, consultative selling. So knowing what you need to sell your business. And I think that really comes from you being able to sell it, you knowing what it takes to sell it, and driving into the skills required in someone else to then pick that up and keep driving it is really important. But you'll see, so IT, trades, healthcare, manufacturing, while everybody claims that manufacturing is dying, it's not. We still have a lot of manufacturing roles in Australia. We do see accounting, hospitality, again, sales comes out on its own across the board, education and training, so the list goes on. But having access to that information, you know what you're up against. So what roles do you need to support your businesses, and how are you stacking up? Who else is out there looking for the same type of people? How do you compete in that market is important to consider. Soft skills. So more and more employers are looking at soft skills rather than the hard technical skills. Roles often require that technical expertise, yes, but more and more companies, like again, using accounting as an example, more tier 1 accounting firms are willing to overlook the fact that you don't have the right technical expertise or the qualifications or the degrees, as long as you have the right aptitude and you have the right base level ability to learn on the job. So we're seeing a huge demand for good communication skills, obviously both verbal and written, the ability to work in teams and collaboratively, commercial awareness, just generally how does business work? And I think more and more education providers investing in developing courses for entrepreneurship helps more people have that understanding. And I think that's also an opportunity for startups to provide that real practical experience to people, either young people or, you know, people that are coming back into school mid-career, to get an opportunity to understand how does a business work. So I know as an employer myself, when somebody comes into the business and understands the fact that we need to make money so they can continue to work for us, and they understand that the whole business has to work, and they play one role in that, but all the cogs have to work together. Understanding where they sit in that process and understanding that whole ecosystem is really valuable to me as an employer, because they understand that bigger picture. Obviously taking initiative, having drive, being self-motivated, having organizational skills, planning skills, project management, time management, flexibility, adaptability, and resilience. Again, I think that's being driven by the speed at which the job market is evolving and technology is evolving. People need to be adaptable to keep pace. If you are just kind of one of those workers who comes in and just does their job and doesn't continue to kind of progress, then you're less valuable to me as an employer, because I need you to keep adapting as the business does and be okay with that change. Because especially as a startup, your business model, your marketing, you're going to be trying new things all the time. For certain people, that can be really confronting. So if you can find somebody who can keep up with that change and not let it affect them negatively, it's really valuable. Having analysis, being able to critically think and have that investigative skills, being resourceful, critical thinking, problem solving. Again, I find that is very sometimes difficult to find people that challenge, and you want those people as part of your team, especially as a startup, who are going to be offering new ideas and questioning you in a nice way, to help progress your business. Because, you know, ideally as a founder, you understand that you're not the fountain of all knowledge, and having good team members who can contribute to that growth is going to be really key, especially in the early days. So leading with that, in terms of market supply, you have to know who's out there. So not only what everybody else in terms of employers is looking for and who you're competing with as an employer, but also who's available in terms of the skills supply is also really, really important and difficult to measure. It's difficult to understand that until you go to market and can't find someone. And then you don't know if can you not find them because you're not attractive enough and people are going to other employers, or is it because there's literally no skills? People just don't have that skill set. So understanding that, because you might need to adjust the way that you're selling that opportunity to say, well, we will teach you that, or we will fund training so you can get the skills. Ideally, if you have the right, again, base level soft skill set, and you have the right aptitude to learn this and the right attitude to learn this, then we'll invest in that. And maybe you drop the salary to say, well, part of your salary is paid in the fact that we're going to help you develop. And that's an investment in them that they could take away to the next job opportunity. And that is a bit of a risk for you, because you're then funding them to develop themselves, that they could then leave you a year, 2 years later and jump into the next opportunity. But really, when you look at tenure nowadays, people stay in jobs less and less. So whether you just kind of have to go into it eyes wide open that people are going to change jobs every 2 to 3 years, no matter what you do. Employee share option plan, invest in training, be a fantastic employer. People are driven by their own self-interests more and more today. So they have less loyalty to the companies that they're working for. And I think it's just part of the changes in the job market that we all have to just embrace, really. So understanding what supply there is. I would like to touch on the fact that there's the aging population of the experienced workforce. So by 2030, they're saying almost 20% of Australia's population will be older than 65. Service industries that rely on experience will continue to expand at 6% per annum. So we're looking at growth areas in aged care and other service areas that deliver on that aging population. They're all growing really quickly. So it just means that we'll have strong demand, but not as much supply in those areas because fewer people are going into education in terms of aged care and community services and those kind of supportive industries. So it's just good to be aware of that. Also the fact that people are living longer, so they have to work longer to support themselves. So you can't necessarily retire at 65 anymore. If you're going to live for another 30 years and your superannuation isn't going to carry you through, then you have to keep working. So how do you offer flexibility and how do you tap into often that gold mine of talent of people who have experience and offer them opportunities that they might not be getting through corporates? Oftentimes there's a huge ageist issue in a lot of recruitment roles and people get looked over when they're at a certain level of their career. That's a real opportunity for startups who are aware of that to try to appeal to that opportunity, that talent that's out there getting overlooked by others. The millennials are coming, they're here. I am one. Super smart, they're technically savvy, they're socially conscious. They want to make a difference, but they are choosy, which, you know, we see a lot of kind of rhetoric out there about all the millennials, they're too picky. I'm a millennial. My business partner, she's of a different generation. And we always have that conversation of the millennials are no different than people who are baby boomers. You know, everybody ideally wanted the same kind of choice and control and, you know, ability to say, no, this is what I want, and I'm going to find what matches that. It's just, I think we have more opportunity to do that today than we did 20, 30 years ago. So, you know, people might begrudge that they didn't have that choice, but now people do. So I think knowing these things, then you can appeal to those different attractive points or appealing points. The big gaps that we see when we look at supply and demand in the job market in Australia, there's a huge gap between the supply of jobs and the demand for jobs in these key areas. So office and professional work, huge amount of jobs, not a lot of people looking for them. Hospitality, more demand in terms of what job seekers want than the job supply. So these things are important to know because how can you then appeal to, say, that hospitality, travel, and tourism position where there's a lot of job seekers who want that job, but not enough jobs for them. So how do you attract those job seekers to consider your opportunities? What skills do they come along with? What attitudes? What kind of persona is looking for a job in hospitality that you could pull into your team? So for instance, hospitality is great for customer service, right? So they have that natural inclination. They ideally have some work experience in hospitality where they're used to being on their feet, fast-paced work environments. They're usually pretty adaptable because they never know what they're going to get. They have that high level of customer service and taking care of people. So could someone who has traditionally worked in hospitality, you give an opportunity to get their first job in an office environment? And how do you use that to your advantage? So again, thinking strategically about, same with retail, it's even worse in retail when you look at those figures. A lot of people want retail jobs. Why? They're flexible, they get paid pretty well. And again, they're customer service jobs. So what can you do to attract those people to look at your job opportunities? Some stats that we find in our research in Australia when we run our surveys. On average, it takes the typical Australian job seeker across all industries, all age groups, all areas, 6 months to find a job. So 6 months of applying for job after job, and typically they're submitting over 100 job applications in that period, which means they're getting rejected 99 times. And whether that's an outright thanks but no thanks, or it's just they never hear from you or the employer again, which is more commonly the case, that's a really, when we found that research, we thought it's really confronting, because if you're unemployed for 6 months and you do have, say, a family or a mortgage, that is a really scary period. I don't know if any of you have recently job searched, but it can be a pretty soul destroying period of your life. And I think as soon as you find a job, you kind of almost put it behind you and go, I'm not going to think about it anymore. That was so terrible. I don't want to ever do that again. So I think putting yourself in those shoes and understanding what job seekers are going through is really important to be that kind of empathetic employer. And I'll touch more on that in a little bit. But what we saw also in that period over 6 months, in 3 months' time, people double the number of online applications they submit in a single session. And that indicates to us the desperation that people hit 3 months in. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, and I don't know what to change other than I'm just going to start applying for almost anything, which means that creates a huge administrative burden on employers who then get more relevant job applications. And it's a big time waste. If you're a small company or a startup company, getting 50 applications and 99% of them are totally irrelevant to what you need, you're wasting your time. So those are some of the challenges that we look at on both sides of the job market and try to figure out, well, how do we solve that? How do we make sure that the right job opportunity is going to the right people? How do we more proactively recruit so you're not just knee-jerking to that hiring need? So it's, again, I think having that understanding is really important moving forward. What we find, yes, thank you so much. What we find holds people back, and especially young people back, because JobGetter has a contract with New South Wales Department of Industry to help reduce the youth unemployment rates in the 6 to 7 regional areas that have been identified in New South Wales as really high, and we're in one today. Most of the time what holds people back is they don't have the right connections. They don't know enough people. They don't have a big enough network, because so many jobs, even especially I think in regional areas, they are found through who you know. Whether it's your parents, your colleagues, your former coworkers, your partner, especially as young people, they don't have those networks yet. So how do they find work? Support is another big one. I don't know if you've had any sort of interaction with a career services team, but they typically don't have the information that you're really looking for, up-to-date information about what's happening in the job market. When you're out of school, who's there to help you? You know, maybe a recruiter, maybe, if you fit the brief that they're recruiting for. Otherwise, they don't typically want to borrow of you. That's one of the challenges that we faced when we first started the business, was we were both looking at job boards and talking to recruiters, but because we were looking for part-time opportunities, we'd never get any callbacks. Nobody wanted to spend any time with us because they're not incentivized. We're not paying them. The employer's paying them. So why help us? And then access to jobs is another one. I think where there's big opportunities regionally is bringing everything into one ecosystem, because you might be driving down Main Street and you might see a couple of signs in windows, we're hiring for this, we're hiring for that, or you might open up the local paper and see some classified ads. Mainstream job boards don't traditionally work very well in regional communities because they just don't have the market's place balanced well enough, employers and jobs and candidates. You have to be in the right place at the right time, even though it's online. You know, you check a job board a week ago and the day before you looked was when the job you wanted came offline because you hadn't looked. So you can miss out on job opportunities because you're not being pushed notifications necessarily. So these are the kind of the main things that hold people back. So these are some of the big challenges that JobGetter tries to help communities solve through technology and collaboration. I'm just going to grab a drink. Am I talking too quickly, or is everybody okay? I like using this quote because we often ask for quite open-ended answers in some of our surveys, because I think that's where we get a lot of the gold. And the first one we ever did was, I think it was 2015, 2016. And reading through responses like this, it just makes your heart hurt because you're just reading these and going, I would love to hire that person. So Tiana was searching for a job for about 4 months, and she said, companies are busy. I understand that. It's not a big deal if they don't reply to every application. Sometimes there's hundreds of them. So she's quite aware at that point, you know, there's lots of people applying, but often after an interview that I've made a lot of effort to get to, like the last one was an hour-and-a-half train ride at $15. They won't even send a simple automated rejection email. At least if I knew 100% that it's gone to someone else, I could move on, but not hearing anything is horrible. And that is the case for I would say 95% of all applicants don't even get a thanks but no thanks automated response. True. And there's so much technology out there that has made that easier to deliver on. And some of the worst ones, to be honest, are the ones that send it almost straight away. It's like within the first 24 hours, it's like, thanks, but no thanks. Did you even look at my application? But that, unfortunately, is the case for so many of them. And I think thinking about the fact that she spent an hour and a half on the train and spent money, she's job searching. She doesn't have a job, so she has no income. She's spending money to try to get to this job opportunity, and she didn't even get a thanks but no thanks. And oftentimes I hear too with these job seekers stories is they'll get a rejection 3 months later, or they won't even get that rejection, but then they get pushed another job opportunity, 4 months later. And it's like, well, I don't even know where I stand on the last one I applied for. So it's a really awful experience. And I think bringing in that personal human connection is really important, to be empathetic towards them. When we did this first survey, 46% of applicants said that their candidate experience, their experience in applying for jobs was poor or very poor. So it's almost half are saying it's absolutely soul destroying. Like, it's terrible. Companies don't care about me, which is awful. 71% said they shared that negative experience if they have had one with family or friends, and 8% vented about it on social media. So this is where I start to get onto the track of, you need to care as a company because it impacts your brand. Whether that's just your employer brand, it's not. It's actually your consumer brand if you have one, and just your general outward facing brand in the market. So if you're not probably going to be Bunnings level, but Bunnings, for instance, get 300,000 people applying for their jobs every year. They only have about 6,000 jobs on offer. So they reject 294,000 people every year. What kind of impact would that have on their business if they were to deliver a better quality candidate experience? Or on the flip side, they deliver a really negative candidate experience and people then tell 71% of their friends. 71% are telling, so of that 294,000, and even more maybe, even the ones that did get a job, maybe they didn't have a great experience, so they'll talk about family and friends. It's just, it's a ripple effect, and it has a significant impact. And I think that's where we really try to talk to both marketing and HR teams, because marketing need to care about the impact on their brands, how the HR team is treating people. 42% of job seekers are less likely to apply to a company again if the hiring team didn't send a thank you for applying email to confirm their application, and 8% would never apply again. So this is where we always make the point of the fact that you're eroding your talent pipeline. I might apply for you today, and if I've had a negative experience or you haven't thanked me for my application, and you try to appeal to the market and recruit again 6 months later, and I get matched to that job opportunity and I'm a really good fit, I'm not going to apply again because you've treated me badly the first time, and I'm not going to forget that necessarily. 57% of job seekers are less likely to apply to a company again if it didn't send an email to tell them about the outcome of their application. Did I get it? Did I not get it? Was I shortlisted? Tell me, give me closure. I want to know, at least tell me that it's been given to somebody else, like Tiana said. Then I can move on. And 21% said they would never apply again. So again, you're eroding it even further. More people, you're going out to market, people have that negative experience, they don't want to appeal, and they're telling their friends, and their friends going, no, I know Dimity applied for that job with that company and it was terrible, so don't apply for that job. Sorry.
A perfect example. Before I was sort of doing governance psychology for the last 10 years, and then I was looking for a pretty big change. I was burnt out, and sort of started last year, I started I was job seeking voluntary, and I still obviously had a role involved in the SRI, and the role hadn't come up yet for me to be able to talk to Will about that role. But I applied for a role with Hunting Health in their grant program, or their Rural University Mental Health Coordinator role, and I applied for that in about October last year. I was successful in getting an interview in first week of December. I still haven't heard that.
Wow.
So I know, and I've asked for feedback. Like I asked, and I know the guy who got the job, so I know who it's been.
Right.
Now, and I'm someone who went to interview. Like I wasn't someone who just gets selected to interview and just to get picked up. But there are only a few of us that got interviewed, and I still go through that process to apply for continuing with them again.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really bad, and all of those things that you tell people, and I, tell people in that role, in that group of the project to give that feedback that that wasn't a positive experience. And if you want someone urgently in talent pools for future, I don't want to go down that again.
No, yeah, exactly. It erodes that pipeline. And then that person too, that you reject, maybe not overtly, you just reject quietly, becomes the best hire for that next role you're recruiting for.
Well, any role as a psychologist is desperate for the mental health. You think that they go, oh wait, we've got so many psych roles, she's a psychologist. Maybe we should ask if she's interested in being on the list for suitable future candidates, but nothing. And then, they continually talk about how hard it is to recruit psychologists regionally.
Yeah, exactly. And they're
but yeah, it's just an example of, and I would imagine they would have a similar volume of applicants to run into everything.
yes, yeah. And with the automation that's available today, there's no excuse.
There's no reason. That's what I thought. There's no reason why. I would have been happy just with a bounce back email that said you weren't successful, thanks so much, we hope you apply in future. That would have been sufficient, but not even that.
Yeah, and what you can also do, and what we advise a lot of, because clients will have systems. I'm sure they have some sort of applicant tracking system. They either have one that's a legacy system and has really poor functionality, and they haven't invested in something new, or they have functionality, they just haven't turned it on. And I think the other thing that is something that most companies can handle is just an automated email that goes, we've received your application. Our typical processing time is 30 days or 45 days or whatever it might be. At least then you're setting that expectation for people. And I know they a lot of times it says, thanks for your application. If you don't hear from us, you're unsuccessful. Which, yes, right, exactly.
Suggestions for startups and scale-ups who may not have these automated systems in place, or are there some good automated systems that require some of our founders considering?
At risk of being really self-promoting, JobGetter. We have a free system that you can post a job ad once a month, and we do all of these automated messages out automatically. So we also deliver personalized feedback, which is one of our big unique points of difference. Because we have the data analytics, we're able to identify, this is what the job required, this is what you've submitted, these are the gaps you have, and then we also are able to compare them to shortlisted candidates to pick up on things that you as an employer might not even be aware of. So you might not realize that 75% of your candidates also had this extra skill that you looked for but you didn't advertise for. So we automate all of that. My last stat on this screen was 51% of job seekers are less likely to apply to a company again if someone accepted their application in store but then never acknowledged it after, while 25% would never apply again. So maybe less relevant for you guys, but if you did have somebody applied to you, maybe it's at a networking function for startups and somebody comes up and says, I'd love to work for you, and then sends you a follow-up resume. Again, it's the same sort of experience of having that personal connection and then being ignored. And we work with a lot of retail brands, and it's terrible how often that happens. So hired or not, on more positive note, if workers did have a positive candidate experience, 90% would actually encourage others to join the company in future. So again, think about you guys. If you were to deliver a really great candidate experience, one, you're going to be leaps and bounds ahead of the corporates that you're competing against a lot of times, because people are going to remember that way they were treated. But then you have brand ambassadors out there advocating for you to go, well, actually, I heard that, I'm part of the, is it Morelli? Morelli, talent pool, and I saw a job notification that they're hiring X. I know someone, I had a really great experience. They're all of a sudden out there recruiting for you. So it's worthwhile investing in providing that positive experience, because it's almost like having a little mini team of recruiters in the community, and a community like an Armidale or a Tamworth, where it is, more people. You're more connected in regional communities than we are in the metros. So more people, and you can, see somebody at, was it Goldfish? Is that where I was this morning? Goldfish Bowl. You bump into somebody there and go, oh, actually, I just got a job alert. The Morelli's hiring a whatever. You should apply for it. Check it out, Yes.
A random question. you ever seen an example where a company deliberately makes the process either difficult or painful or not enjoyable because they get so many applications?
Absolutely, yeah.
I went through an experience many years ago with a US investment bank.
Okay.
And you had to create your own online account and the password. You know how annoying to use a password must have a capital. This was, you had to have 16 characters, 4 of them capitals, 3 of them symbols. It was quite a joke. And it occurred to me that they were probably doing that quite deliberately because they get so many applicants.
Yeah, absolutely do. And it's really short-sighted because all they're worried about at that point is, how do I make my job easier? How do I cut down on the number of applications I have to filter? And even, I mean, a company like an investment firm or investment bank would have an applicant tracking system. And I get on a bit of a soapbox because a lot of these systems are very expensive. They're legacy. They've been in the system. They have long-term contracts. So they're hard to disrupt. And they don't work well because what they're focused on is cutting out people rather than actually considering who's the best fit for the role. They look for things like keywords, and it's really simple example is I say waitress and they're looking for food and beverage attendant. I get knocked out of the system because it doesn't recognize that they're the same thing. So I think short-sighted companies do that on purpose. They put screening questionnaires on their job applications to cut people out and make their job easier. But it frustrates really good applicants, and applicants will bounce out of those processes because it's like, no, I'm not going to come up with a 16-character, really complicated password. You're ridiculous. I'm going to apply for somebody else. So yeah, absolutely.
Do you think the same goes for the employers that put forward things like, you need to send us a video and these 3 questions? Because I know we talked about this with one of our startups in Tamworth, and she said, no, like that's the new way of doing things. And I said, well, the other side of that though is, do you miss out on potentially amazing candidates who might be introverted and really uncomfortable with that?
Yes, absolutely. We introduced video interviewing years ago because we saw it as an opportunity to make that sourcing selection process more efficient. So especially working with quite a few retail brands in the beginning when we first started the business, it's incredibly time consuming to get somebody in the door that, you know, within 30 seconds you can tell they're not the right fit. And if you could screen them through video, it would make things much more efficient. But we found a huge, I guess, not backlash, it wasn't huge, but there are those job seekers who are really uncomfortable doing video interviewing. And so you miss out on those candidates, exactly to your point, by making that part of the process, because that saves you time. So yeah, absolutely. I think considering that, and what we wound up introducing was a way for job seekers to say, receive a video interview request from an employer and respond back to it to say, I'm really interested in the role. I'm just not comfortable doing a video. And then at least it's a way for them to respond to it, and not, because many would just ignore it, you know, because job seekers are uncomfortable and yeah, and it's not just the introverted ones, it's the one that's also maybe they have mental health challenges that they work through. They don't feel confident. They maybe, yeah, it's difficult. We run a content series that we call Hints from HR, which we interview HR professionals so we can get really practical insights to our job seekers about what people look for who make these decisions. And one of the interviews was with the head of HR at Dymocks. And one of the things he said was, one of the questions is, what do you first notice about a candidate when they come to an interview? And his response was the energy level. Like, I want to know who you are and what lights you up in an interview. And a job seeker commented on the article, I'm someone who deals with depression. How do I turn up to an interview and light up, you know? Right. So these are real issues that we need to, I think it's really powerful for you guys in your position to consider these things, because you have the ability to, whereas some corporates they're stuck in their ways. They have the same processes. These are opportunities for you to be different. Other more positive stats were, again, 23% of candidates who had a positive experience were more likely to purchase products or services from the company. So again, it impacts your consumer brand. If you are a business trying to sell something, then that impacts that. And 37% would tell others to seek employment there. So key opportunities. So these are some of the things that I think you guys should consider as part of your recruitment strategy. One, tap into the groups that everyone else is ignoring. So aging population, younger workers who have no experience, groups, that are typically marginalized, like those with disability or mental health issues, people who have no experience or are changing careers, working moms coming back into the workforce who struggle so hard, like a lot of them really struggle to find another foothold into a work environment. Sometimes people are trying to change industries. They've had 8 years in hospitality and all of a sudden they've realized they really want to work in an office. Give those people chances, because if they're the ones everyone else is cutting out, they're a gold mine of opportunity. But it does require you to be more flexible as an employer and possibly invest more time into the people development side of things. But it's an opportunity for you. So I really urge you to look at your local employment figures. So I've touched on the youth employment angle. The New England Northwest region is one of the 5 worst youth unemployment hotspots and 20 worst in the whole country. That's a real opportunity. We recently helped fund an assessment of almost 1,500 Tamworth high school students, which I know we're about an hour away. Is it an hour away? But it would be very similar, I would assume, in Armidale. That students between years 9 and 12, 66% of them said that they wanted more work experience opportunities. And that is often what holds them back. I had a conversation, because we work more and more regionally now, with the parish or resort HR team. And they were saying, when our kids leave our community, because we haven't had enough entry-level work experience opportunities for them, they'll leave and go to, say, Wollongong or Sydney, going in with no work experience. So when they're in the job market in those communities, they're already so much further behind the other youth because they've had an opportunity to have entry-level work experience, whereas their kids haven't. So again, I really always make the point, startups especially, because you are in a position to be more adaptable, kind of throw out that rule book of recruitment and give someone a chance to come into your organization and really use it as an opportunity to figure out who they are and what they like. And you can get a lot of great skills from these kids, the enthusiasm they'll bring in, taking on that role as teaching them about the world of work and giving them that opportunity. You don't have to lock yourself in. So what we've done in the past is bring somebody in for, say, a 3-month internship that they can do quite flexibly. And we'll put them in charge of things like social media or marketing or maybe some admin work or something that's entry level that you can easily systemize and teach them how to do it and give them an opportunity to get into your workforce and learn. And then if they do well after 3 months, then you can offer them a part-time opportunity. One of our best stories was a girl who we brought in. She was in her first year of uni, studying HR, I think it was. And we thought, HR tech startup, she'll get some experience, she'll learn something. And she changed her study path, I think 3 or 4 times. By the time she graduated, she finished with, I think it was a degree in business and a minor in entrepreneurship or something like that. And she wound up getting a graduate role with Telstra, and she started running Mirror D as a community manager, which is Telstra's incubation fund or incubation program. So I think I really urge you to look at that youth unemployment angle and how can you, one, leverage it to your ability, but also play a really important role in the community. Same with the aging population. So I really not just look at the youth employment angle, but what other groups in the Armidale community can you tap into that struggle to find work? 2, do it better. Be proactive and deliver a really great applicant experience. And I think we always make that point. People talk about candidate experience all the time. It's applicant experience. It's from, if I've applied for a job with you, if I've had a really great experience, 90% of your applicants will then go out and encourage people to apply with you. So it's not just your shortlist who you deliver that, we call it consumer quality, customer quality experience, but the whole applicant process. So put yourself in their shoes and think about what would you have liked when you were an applicant, if you were an applicant. Some more stats that we found. 77% of people are willing to accept a salary that's 5% lower than their expected offer if the employer created a great impression through the hiring process. So if you can't offer the same salary that a competitor would, you just delivering on a better quality candidate experience could mean the difference between them taking your job and somebody else's. 73% of candidates would also accept a lower salary if the company had great online reviews. So again, kind of that consumer brand and also employer brand impression online. More and more companies are using things like Glassdoor to provide employee reviews, LinkedIn, your own website, etc. That has a major consideration. So again, you use those things to your advantage. 3, you're a startup and startups are sexy. People like the idea of working for a startup more and more. We found, 8 years ago, startups were kind of, risky, thus people were considering starting one, let alone working in one. But I think we saw a real turn about 4 years ago. More and more universities were starting to invest in having startup career fairs or having startups come and speak to their MBA students or their undergrad students about what it's like to not just start a startup, but also work in a startup. So there's a number of things that I think you guys can use to your advantage about appealing to people who don't necessarily want to work in corporate anymore and attract them to come and work for you. Again, to that point I think I made earlier about more and more people realize that companies, corporates aren't this secure career path option that they once were. So they're much more willing to take a chance on a more risky company like a startup than they ever were before. And I think more people realize that they can bounce into a startup and if it's not right for them, bounce back out to corporate and not have hurt their careers at all. And actually probably boost their careers because they've had that innovation experience.
So you don't think the startups need to compensate in any sort of, what would your suggestions be in terms of, obviously startups difficult to compensate in terms of salary because.
Especially with corporate.
Yeah. Compared to corporate, but what would your recommendations be in terms of other types of incentives that people respond well to?
Yeah, good question. I've got some. So let me click through these and I'll no, don't be, no, that's a great question. One, making the point that you guys create more jobs than corporates do. First, even just knowing that from your own kind of standpoint, the fact that you, as a group of type of business, startups and small businesses create a lot more jobs than the corporates do because they basically create jobs and take them away at an even keel. So they might create 20,000 jobs, but then they'll take away 20,000 jobs. Here's a Fin Review article about, I think it was specifically, so in the one I've highlighted, firms less than 2 years old were most responsible for driving the 1.6 million net new jobs in, I think it was 2016. Yeah, 2016. So that's a pretty significant attraction factor, is the fact that you guys are creating those opportunities in an area like Armidale where it's regional employment. We need to create more jobs to keep people here. That's to your advantage. They're much more flexible in who they hire and the jobs they offer. So these are kind of points to make to people about working for startups. The fact that you are able to sit down with somebody and go, well, this is the role I need. What works for you? What works for me? And have that negotiation. You're going to get a lot more experience a lot faster with a startup than in a corporate. You have that opportunity to kind of have a hand on a lot of different things than you would normally in a corporate position. You just get that scope because it's kind of all hands in when you need something done, which is really appealing to people who are who would get bored in having the same routine every day, day in, day out. And that can appeal also to the younger market who's trying to figure out what they like. You know, who am I in the working world and what should I be pursuing more? That means that those people you hire are going to score a lot more employability points. They're going to grow as a person and be much more employable through your work experience opportunity than any other. So the fact that they are going to have to be more reliable, they're going to be versatile, they can point to things that can prove, you know, my company changed business models 3 times in a year and I was able to adapt and help deliver, and this is what I helped them achieve. They have to be a team player. They have to be willing to learn. So all of these things then just basically add to their credibility as an employee that they can use as they move on. So it's a great progression story. They are going to swap the cushy comfort that comes with a corporate job. They don't have the same budgets. They don't have the same expense reports, their expense budgets. But it's a lot more exciting, and there's a lot more incentive. So you can offer incentives like flexibility, being able to trial different skills and adapt and adjust their role as they as the business evolves, but also as they evolve as people. I think I've got this in my later slides, but you have an opportunity to learn through the people that you're working with, because oftentimes you as founders are very innovative in thinking. They're going to learn by osmosis by working with you. So that's a real badge of honor that they can take with them as they go. They're really going to be challenged. It's not a cruisy opportunity, but a lot of people don't want that. When we look at what job seekers want, they want to be challenged, and they want their work to be recognized, which they don't always get in a corporate position. They're not always going to get the pat on the back. They're not going to talk to their CEO of the company and get that thank you so much. Did you have
did you see that across the board, or is it specific to certain areas?
in terms of startups, or
In terms of them wanting to be recognized?
yeah, it's across the board. Yeah, definitely. People just don't get the pat on the back in corporates because we're one little cog in a huge machine, and they just don't get that support necessarily. That I think startups have an opportunity to have that direct relationship more often. The chance of making a much bigger impact. So if your company goes from having 2,000 users to 10,000 users, and they've had a role to play in that, that's a great thing to put on their resume as a key achievement. And they can say, I was directly part of the team that helped make that happen. So I think much more tangible, measurable impact through a startup than a corporate. Does that kind of touch on? So number 4, reaching the people who want to relocate, because regional is also a real appeal nowadays. Less and less people want to, as I think we spoke earlier, have this grind that comes with working and living in a metro area. So I think, again, I urge you to look at your local economic figures and compare them to the metro. So things like cost of living. On average, what does it cost to live in Sydney versus Armidale? And then compare your cost of living to the salary you're offering. What's the difference? What's the disposable income I'm going to have moving from, and I don't know how many people have made that move here, but it's really appealing. I don't want to struggle to buy property, again, using housing and land prices. You can buy a house here for what? And even maybe make that part of your job description. It should be part of the sale to say, move to Armidale, we'll help you we'll help set you up. The community is like this, schools are great, the local community initiatives, use testimonials even from people who live here to go, I made the move and this is what I love about it. Commute times. I mean, it can take me an hour to drive something that should take 10 minutes in Sydney. Travel times. Lou and I were talking earlier about her daughter who lives in Leichhardt in Sydney and has to travel to UNSW, and it takes her an hour and a half. And that drive should take 20 minutes. So I think you pinpoint what people care about and then draw the comparisons and then try to target people who are not in Armidale to get them to relocate. How am I going for time? Okay. I might start talking faster. I think these slides, you guys can distribute them too, right? Okay, so top 3 things job seekers look for. When we asked to candidates what really matters to them, the most common answers were, number 1, location, 2, salary, 3, hours. And what I like to point out is because people who answered location, 12% of them specifically said they want a job that's close to home. So again, talking about commute times, if I can live in Armidale and get to work in 5-10 minutes versus Sydney an hour and a half, that's going to be appealing. When people said salary or pay, I thought it was really important to point out how often people said decent, fair, reasonable when they said pay. It's not like I want to be paid $1 million. It's I want a reasonable pay that lets me live the life I want to live. So I think taking all those things into account, again, if that's what people want, how can you appeal to the fact that people want a good location that pays them a good wage and have flexibility in their hours. Give the people what they want. So knowing what job seekers want, appeal to that. When we asked them about the profile of like what kind of matters to them most, we looked at all the adjectives people used. So number one, people said friendly, flexible, fun, fair, decent, reasonable, nice, enjoyable, safe, equal, loyal, reliable. Out of like, I think it was 1,500 responses, those were the adjectives that came up the most when we asked about what they want in a job. So again, use those adjectives in your job descriptions. So when you're advertising, appeal to what people want. When we asked them to paint the picture of the dream company they would like to work for, it came out really clear that people want a supportive company that has a friendly team, a safe, fun, and fast-paced environment, and clear expectations. This ideal employer would also provide flexibility, opportunities to train and develop within a company, and other meaningful benefits. And it was also really clear to us across the board that diversity, equal opportunity, and an alignment of values are important to today's job seeker, because they listed things like company values and ethics when they were describing what kind of company they want to work for. So again, taking that into account when you're writing your job ads and your company descriptions and the About Us or your team page, appeal to what people are looking for, and think about how you can provide that in a way that a corporate can always, and that sets you apart. In terms of the ideal job, respondents described a role that is challenging, yet suits their skill set, one that interests them, is enjoyable, and provides satisfaction and a sense of meaning. It was also interesting how many times respondents listed things relevant to the way the role is advertised. There appears to be a rejection of nondescript job ads that fail to outline employer expectations or the profile of their ideal applicant. The number of job ads that we read that start out with, we are a company, we have 3,000 people and blah, 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 all about them, and nothing about the role or who they're looking for. The job ad should be written, in our opinion, like a real estate ad. You're not selling the specs of a house. You're selling the vision and the ideal of living in that house. So, you know, this is your living room where you'll spend time with your family, and same thing. This is your office where we do XYZ and we have game nights, and sell the vision of what it's going to mean to be part of your team. And also, to the point before, job seekers also make judgment calls based on their application process. So whether there's an assurance that they'll receive an acknowledgement of their application and feedback on the date the job ad was posted, this is, we think, indicative of job seekers rebelling against jumping through inane hoops. They want to know where they stand. They want to know from the job ad what to expect. Because if I don't want to invest my time in applying for a company that's going to make me jump through hoops and doesn't care about the impact of that on me. The other thing I want to touch on is we also asked about what job seekers want in terms of what do they want to know about a company they are interested in working for. So 24% of candidates said they want exclusive information about when and where you're hiring next. So if you know that in 6 months' time, you're going to be hiring a tech team, start putting that out to your network. Ideally, it's a talent pool of people that you're starting to funnel in that are interested in possibly working for you. And you're letting them know in about 6 months' time, we're growing. We're expecting to be recruiting our first tech team. 20% want general information about the company and what they like or what they stand for. So again, they want to know about you. What are your values? 16% want videos of the HR team, what they look for in candidates. So you guys probably don't have HR teams, but it could be you saying, this is me, this is my business, this is what we're going to be looking for. Again, 12% said they want videos of existing staff explaining their job. So if you do have other staff members, people love video content. So use your smartphone, record a quick video and put it up. 10% wanted information about sales or special offers or competitions and events. 9% wanted behind the scene pictures. 7% want similar stuff to people, what they post on Facebook, but more work related. And 2% wanted stuff from Facebook. So again, from a corporate perspective, we see people try to do it a candidate community strategy that's really kind of lazy. And so we were just pointing out the fact that you can't just post the same stuff you post on Facebook. Really, they want something new. They want something different that's more work related. So again, you could build all of this stuff into your recruitment strategy. I think do I have more than 1.5? Give HR a seat at the strategy table and make it a priority. I think now building that behavior and structure in your company is really important, because oftentimes corporates leave HR out of this boardroom. They're not brought into the table to make decisions. And I think that's a real mistake. So they'll bring marketing in, but they won't bring HR. And then they talk about how people are their most important asset. And it's just, that doesn't make any sense. So I think if you build some of these strategies in now, you'll set yourself up well for success in the future. So defining your unique CVP, your candidate value proposition. I've talked on this, EVP versus CVP. You really need to care about your candidate value proposition, and they can be similar. A simple test is, would you want to work for you? Put yourself in their shoes. Are you selling the opportunity to join your company in a way that appeals to you as a person, or test it with the rest of the cohort? You really need to think about that from a marketing perspective. We recommend having a marketing persona in a way, for each role that you're going to recruit for and job ad. So test each role, each job ad for each role with would that persona want to apply for that job? Who are you trying to target? I'm going to skim through these because we're at 10:30, but this basically just gets you to think about, how do you emotionally appeal to people? What's the experience you can offer them, and what kind of contractual benefits can you offer? So think through those things when you're thinking through what is your offer to people who come and work for you. You want to analyze that offer with your persona in mind. Work through these sorts of descriptors. So what's the work offering? How do you prove that you do that? Because you have to have that authenticity. You can't just say we're a really fun, flexible employer if you're not actually going to practice that, because that expectation when somebody actually joins your team and finds that it's not true is just what's the point? They're going to eventually not be happy and leave, or you're not going to be happy with the person you've hired. So thinking through this again structurally from the start is really important to set a really good foundation for yourselves. Again, think through the work environment, the rewards, the people, the opportunity, and then stress test it by saying, well, how do you actually prove that you do that? Design your offer, and then sanity check it. So is it inspirational? Is it unique? Is it strategically aligned? And is it focused? Look at Apple. We always use Apple as a great example, because Apple have done a really great job they basically build a tribe. Like, what's the difference between Apple and Samsung? People really want to work for Apple. They don't really so much care about working for Samsung. Apple say on their career page, this is where some of the world's smartest, most passionate people create the world's most innovative products and experiences. Join us and you'll do the best work of your life and make a difference in other people's lives. So you think about that from what I've just gone through in terms of the dream employer. They're really trying to appeal to what job seekers want with this statement, and coming up with a statement like this to drive your own recruitment strategies, I think sets the tone for your workforce moving forward. So again, doing that work on the upfront is really important. It can evolve. It's just starting out with an intention. And then credibility before visibility. So again, stress testing it, making sure that what you're saying is actually authentic and you're going to live those statements that you make. So your recruitment arsenal. Again, I'm going to breeze through these because you'll get the slides and you can actually work through them later. But these are just some ideas of how you can tap into what we call the hidden job market. There's a lot of people out there that are looking. How do you funnel them into a community? So the old way hiring happens, we reject this. We think this is, I'm going to say bullshit. Expensive job ads. They deliver an irrelevant application avalanche in your inbox, and it costs you weeks, if not months of downtime. Nobody likes recruiting because it's, especially as a small business owner, time you're not spending on growing your business. So how can you make that process so much more efficient for you and a better quality experience for candidates? The knee jerk is why people find themselves in that position. Everybody does it, but only a few people get lucky and win by actually knee jerking to a hiring need. If you go oh shit, I've got to hire a salesperson, put an ad up, and you just leave it up for 30 days and pick the best of the bunch that come through, you're doing yourself a disservice. If you're knee jerking, you're relying on right place, right time, the right person seeing it. And if you're more proactive, you have more time to nurture a community and then tap into that community who's already brand aware. Hopefully you've told them, I'm going to be hiring a salesperson in 3 months. Other people have joined the community, and you've now got a good, healthy short list of people to go to. We say the solution is to create your own barrel, shooting fish in a barrel. Create that talent pool of people that are around your employer brand so that you can profile who you need and tap into them and connect with them straight away. So how do you do that? We argue you should be creating a huge, massive funnel. So any digital touch point, any physical touch point that you can use to send people into a community, whether that's just an email list, if that's as simple as you want it to be, it should at least be an email list in a marketing automation system. So I'm going to fly through these. 18 ways to tap into your hidden job market. These are the easiest ones. Subscribe to industry newsletters. So if you are watching the industry newsletters in your relevant industry, you know who's dropping staff that you could potentially pick up. So again, thinking about, say, retail. If you know a store is closing and they're letting go thousands of people or hundreds of people, are those people going to have a skill set that you can use? Say in customer service, help desk support, with a bit of training, can you take those people who are being made redundant and bring them into your organization? So think about relevant industries to you or the roles that you're going to be recruiting for, and subscribe to them so that you know when somebody else is making big cuts, that's your opportunity to pick those great people up. Social media. If you have any sort of social media channels, you should be talking to those channels about working for you. If you share a job ad, push them to your social channels. Let people know when you're hiring. Your email signature. Put a link on there to your LinkedIn page, your JobGetter account, your job ad that's most recent, an email newsletter list for just people interested in working for you. Put something in your email signature because you never know who's looking and you never know who knows somebody who's looking. So make it easy for them to connect to you. Your own newsletter. If you're already doing a newsletter to your candidate base, your community, again, there should be a link on there that says, do you know someone, or are you interested in working for us? Click here and follow our news about work opportunities. PR and media. Are you going through a growth spurt? Are you all of a sudden going to start opening up, especially in a regional community? Be really easy probably to get some media pickup on Morelli is hiring 5 new people next month because they've just gone through a massive growth spurt. Not only are you getting information about your company and how quickly you're growing in the media, but then you're also, everybody that reads that story knows that you have job opportunities. And it's a great opportunity to get, to tell everybody what's happening. Your own people. So if you do have staff or you have a co-founder or they've got family, use them to refer people. And also internally develop people. So you might, does anybody have a team at the moment? Is it just the founders? How many people do you have? Right, okay, so that's a great example of somebody who could move up. You've got a new requirement, fund them to go do a course if they need it, 6 months, online, whatever it might be. Yeah, I think sometimes people forget to look internally before they go external. Not so much in startups. I think startups are pretty good at going, this is who I have and this is who I can help develop, but corporates are terrible at it. Industry conferences. So if you are going to conferences, I know Tony said he was at something in Darling Harbour yesterday. You know, if I was hiring right now, I'd be telling all of you. We're not, unfortunately. But yeah, just make that part of the process at the end to go, if you're interested in working for us, join our talent pool, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll make sure that you're aware as soon as we're hiring something next. Speaking at events. So again, same thing, just making sure that's part of your pitch. Skip through that. It's just basically an example of what you could put at like the end of your slides. Now I'm going backwards, sorry. So a bit more effort is your job ads. Rewrite your job ads if you do have existing job ads. Is it all about you? Does it sell your role in your company? Are you using jargon that nobody understands? unusual titles. People come up with all sorts of crazy ways of saying, you know, what was the one? I think it was like receptionist. It was a receptionist role, but it was like director of first impressions. It was the job ad. It's like, well, what does that mean? And now it says director, and now I'm not going to apply for that because I'm a receptionist. Like, so just don't be too creative, or if you are, make sure you're explaining exactly what that means. And gender specific wording, I think, is an interesting one to kind of maybe stress test yourself on. Is, are you using wording that turns off one of the genders? Like, is it really male focused wording that is not appealing to female applicants, or vice versa? Your careers page, do you even have one? Is it up to date? Can people register their interest in working for you and stay in touch with you? I think if you guys are startups, you probably have pretty good control over your websites. So it's pretty easy to put this in place if you don't have one. Local networks. So where does your target applicant spend their most time? Is it online in forums like GitHub or whatever it is? How do you get their attention and build a relationship? So how do you tap in? If you're looking for a working mom to work school hours a couple days a week, target moms groups. Are they always at Goldfish Bowl? I think that's what it's called, right? You know, put up a flyer or hang out there, or ask the cafe, you know, I'm really looking for somebody. Can I just put a little sign up for a week? Again, think about all these different touch points in the community and how can you leverage, you know, if you're looking for tech talent or a marketing talent or somebody who's innovative, go to the startup events and connect with people there. Talk to recruiters. You know, they might know someone. Just think about who you can leverage. Bit more effort, again, business groups, even just here in the incubator or different accelerator programs, business chamber, what other business groups can you connect to? Connect and help each other so you can cross-refer. Online forums, again, go where your target applicant spends time. Alumni, school, your own alumni, previous jobs or contacts that you have from other jobs, who can you tap into? Job seeker advocates, so employment service providers, job active providers, they're desperate to connect some of their candidates' job opportunities, so build a relationship with them. There's some really great people who work with these job active providers, and really the sad truth is a lot of job active providers either consciously or unconsciously don't nurture type A candidates who are really great candidates because they spend more time with the type B and C. And in the worst possible cases, they purposely neglect the type A candidates who are the most employable because they get more funding from the government if they're type B or C, which means if they leave them long-term unemployed, they become less employable, they get more money from the government for placing them later. So again, don't think that they're all, you know, going to send you the worst applicants. They have some great people on their rosters. Bit more effort, rethink your target. Who could you be unintentionally excluding? Ambitious existing employees who want to move up, those who are disadvantaged and not part of the mainstream, and the opposite of who everybody else is hiring. Rethink the role. Again, that TNT example I used before. Can it be split into two? Can you do two part-time roles rather than one full-time role? Can it be done remotely? What can you do to make it more appealing? Market your employer brand. So if people are truly the heart of your business, invest in being an employer of choice. Invest time into developing how you're going to engage your employees. Develop a recruitment marketing strategy so you're getting the message out about why you should be an employer of choice, and communicate with people with relevant content. You know, all of that list of 24% want this, 20% want that. Think about that and how do you implement it. So now what? It's just not up to just HR. I mean, really as a startup, it's up to you. The entire business needs to help and make that part of their considerations. Choose just a handful of those 18 ideas and implement a couple or one even, and just get started. You don't have to do all 18 at once. Pick the ones that are easiest for you to implement and make it easy for yourselves. And then you start to layer them until you create this massive funnel. Ideally, you want some sort of recruitment marketing strategy or candidate CRM, and that can literally just be MailChimp account. Here's my list of everybody who's interested in working for me, and send a newsletter out once a month, once a quarter. Keep your job seekers informed through your company's newsletter, social media accounts, and make sure there's an easy way for them to connect and communicate with you. Closing thoughts. If you're doing this, it's not time to hire. We've done this in our business, and the roller coaster is hard for an employee to go along the ride with you. That doesn't mean that you're never going to be on some sort of roller coaster as a startup. You're going to always be on some sort of up and down track, but you want to be out of the worst, most volatile part of the kind of roller coaster when you make the decision to bring people onto your team. We've brought them on in our experience too early at times. And that is, one, distracting for us as business leaders, because then you're now managing team members. And that's why we've kind of scaled our business up and down over the years. When we've needed to kind of reinvent and do the next big change, we kind of scale our team down. And you don't want to bring people in and let them go, ideally. You want to be offering a consistent opportunity. Ideally, you want to keep your organization and your liabilities as flexible as possible. So consider outsourcing, contracting, interns, work integrated learning programs through universities and other education providers, traineeships where you can actually help get funding from the government to bring people onto your team before you actually offer a permanent position. Because it's just more liability. It locks you in. You then have an obligation that you feel really, obligated to that person that you've now hired to continue that role. But you might find 6 months down the track, you can't actually afford them, or they're not the right person, or you don't actually need that role. You need another one. So don't lock yourself in if you can. Avoid paying in equity. I know everybody recommends this, and it is oftentimes one of the only cards that you can really play, especially in the beginning days. But if you do it too soon, you could give away more equity than it's really worth for that person to bring onto team. And sometimes you bring the wrong person on and offer them equity, and then you're locked in. And I've seen that ruin businesses. Businesses go out of business because they've offered too much equity to an early employee that then turns out to be the wrong fit. It happens all the time, and I think more often than it's reported. So I think while it can be appealing, and a lot of people recommend doing employee share option plans, and I do think that's relevant, make sure, in our experience, we've made them, the clause is you have to stick with us. As a business that we intend to exit one day, we've had people drop out of the business at crucial periods that could have meant the end of our business. And we were lucky it didn't, but it could have. And then you have that person carrying equity and they've just left you in the lurch. So I caution people.
We've had a bit to do with this in the past with other companies.
Okay.
Three ways that, just as a comment, that we saw companies deal with exactly this issue, dealing equity as a bit of a carrot for attracting someone. The first one is delay it. You must work with us for a period of 5 years.
Yes.
And then you receive shares, or you receive something that vests in 5 years. So you have the right to receive shares. You issue shares that vest in 5 years. The other is a different type of security. Perhaps it's a non-voting financial interest or a different class of share.
Right.
And the other one, which was quite interesting, was you had to buy into the company at a very nominal value per share. It was really the value of the cash on the company's balance sheet. And at the end, if you decide to leave, the company bought those shares back at exactly the same price. So the value of the shares never goes up or down. It's always the same. That's the dollar. As a result, the dividends that are paid are very, very substantial. So you're really just buying a dividend stream as the income staff member. All three of those ones work really.
Yeah, especially the first one, that's how we've operated now. It's vesting. So if they're not with us for the long haul, then they don't get their equity. But yeah, those are great suggestions. So talk to this guy afterwards. Save yourself future headaches. Everything should be in writing. Don't do anything without an agreement. It might be a friend of a friend or somebody's, partner. Everything should be just treated as if, there's no personal relationship and it's all in writing, because this will come back to bite you. So vesting clauses, non-disclosure agreements, so that you're making sure they don't spin up a competitor 6 months down the track. Making sure you actually have employment contracts. And these are all templates you can get either through the incubator or, there's a lot of free resources online that you can access. And just start keeping everything in the cloud. We highly recommend, if you don't already have a due diligence folder that you're keeping these sorts of things in, just make it part of your practice. It's just good health for the startup, so that one day if you do get asked for your due diligence folder, you're not scrambling to put all this stuff in there. The other one that's actually not on here that I do recommend just keeping in mind is a deed of release. So if you do have somebody join your team and then leave, you want them to sign off on a deed of release that just confirms the fact that they're not going to compete with you. It basically reconfirms everything that was in their employment contract. It's just good practice. So the ready to hire test. You've done the job or the role yourself, and there's a clear, repeatable pattern that somebody can come in and do themselves. I think this was something that we learned. We hate sales, my founder and I. It's not our skill set. We've had to learn it. And we always tried to hire somebody that could pick up that role and just leave it to them. But I think we've always tried to outsource it. And without knowing how to sell it and give somebody that brief, then you're doing yourself and them a disservice, because you're basically saying, oh, you're good at sales, go sell it. But if you don't know how to sell it, then how are they going to? So, I mean, there's different roles where this doesn't apply so much, like tech, for instance, but you still want to know, how do you want it to be done? Hiring this person is going to have a direct impact on your growth and free you up then to double the effort and therefore hopefully the growth, or focus your energy on other work that's just as crucial to your success. So you want to make sure that they're going to have an impact and it's clearly measurable. Otherwise, you'll wind up hiring somebody and 12 months down the track go, what do you do? What impact are you having? We recently had to let go 2 staff because we needed more of a focus on revenue than we did on marketing. And the marketing wasn't contributing to revenue. And so we just needed to make that call as a business to scale that team down so we can invest more in our sales team. You can't deliver on your business plan without a specialist skill set. So it's kind of hiring that person is going to have a direct impact, or you can't deliver on your business plan without it. And you've already evaluated the new hire adequately, and it's more efficient to have them on as a staff member rather than, say, a contractor. And you have enough cash flow to last a minimum of 6 months at the new burn rate. I think really forward forecasting that to make sure you don't run out of money 3 months in of offering somebody a role. And the other mistake I think I see people make is offering, you've say raised money and you're going, okay, great, I'm going to reward my whole team by giving everybody a salary increase. What does that mean for your burn rate? You give everybody a salary increase, all of a sudden you've got that now new obligation at a new level. And if you can't keep up with that level and you're not confident in your sales forecast that you're going, or investment forecast that you're going to keep up, then don't make that offer in the beginning. And maybe it's a bonus instead of a salary increase. We've made that mistake in the past too. So do you actually have time to nurture and train a new hire? Because you have to be able to have that resource available, because they're going to need hand-holding in the first few months. And then you might find that somebody you thought needed no hand-holding actually needs a lot more than you expected to. So just making sure you're conscious of that before you bring somebody on. Ideally, before you start hiring people, you should have an employee handbook, just basics. Again, you can Google templates. I can give you some advice about what you should have in it. Ideally, you have some sort of cloud-based intranet. We use Google, Google Sites. Free, set up pages, add to it, documentation, work from home policies, that sort of thing should all be added onto it, because then they can access it and you can keep it up to date. Ideally, what I've done with our staff that makes it really easy in terms of setting expectations is giving them either daily, weekly, or monthly checklists so they can self-manage themselves, and you have a way of determining whether they're delivering on what their expectations are. So again, setting those clear expectations in a way you're going to measure them is really important from the start. So just as a kind of recap of recruitment, leverage your network and your assets. What do you have at your disposal that's free to help you build that funnel? Don't put up walls to make it hard for people to connect with you regarding employment opportunities. Make it as easy as you can, but have a streamlined system in place. So obviously you don't want your inbox full of resumes. You want to have some other system. Tap into the hidden job market. Write compelling job ads that really appeal to your personas that you're trying to target. Use what you've got to compete for talent while being really clear about the reality of working for a startup. You don't want to hide what it's like to actually work in a startup. You want to be quite open with it. So you set that expectation before people actually choose to apply for your role. So you're not going to have corporate budgets for, trips and travel and that sort of thing. But these are the benefits you will have. And setting that expectation is really important. Practice candidate care, so that applicant experience. Bring your people in to help assess the new hires. So if you have a team of 6, getting them partly involved in the interview process is really important, so you can get their opinions and it's not just you, because sometimes it's really easy to emotionally connect or emotionally react to somebody you're interviewing. But if you have other viewpoints, it can help kind of stress test that. And just be consistent in your processes. So ideally setting out, this is how I'm going to interview someone, and using that same process for every candidate you interview. Otherwise, you run that risk of being more emotive and empathetic towards someone you're trying to assess. So a couple of quick guidelines for positive candidate experiences. Treat them with the same attention you give your customers. So again, we always say your candidate experience should be the same as your customer experience. Create a personalized and consistent end-to-end journey. Have a proactive communication strategy for them, and use technology to make it efficient as possible. And my final point is just don't compromise on the hire. We've made that mistake when we're just like, we just need this person to come in and fix this gap that we have. And if you compromise on the quality of the person, getting them out of the business again is a nightmare, and you don't want to deal with it. If you can avoid hiring somebody just because you're in a crunch, do, and just go without until you find the right person. I've got resources that I'll send through to you guys. Like I said, you can use the system for free if you're only recruiting once a month, so why not? And I'll follow up with the team, so send the slides around, but also I've got 3 listed there, but I've got some other resources I can send through that I think you can just have on hand when you are ready for, writing job ads and that sort of thing. So that's it from me. Questions?